먹어도 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea announces a fresh set of sanctions against the North, adding 7 North Koreans and 2 Russian vessels that are allegedly involved in the regime's nuclear and missile development and its military cooperation with Moscow. South Korea is set to undertake the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council next month for the first time in 10 years, with plans to have cybersecurity and North Korea on top of the agenda. South Korea's push for a medical school admissions hike has been finalized, with the country's University Council confirming the increase for the first time in 27 years. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the highly anticipated summit between South Korea, Japan, and China that'll take place next Monday. Amid tensions arising from regional issues, the 3 sides are likely to try to push for cooperation rather than discuss sensitive issues. This includes the possible revival of discussions on forming a 3-way free trade deal. Our top office correspondent, Oh Soo-young, talked to some experts.
South Korea, Japan and China will focus on cooperation, not contentious security issues, at their long-stalled Trilateral summit on Monday. Experts told Arirang News that the meeting comes as the 3 Northeast Asian neighbours seek to reduce geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific region, along with trade and economic uncertainties. Seoul's top office said Thursday that President Yoon Suk-yeol, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese Premier Li Qiang would discuss 6 main areas of cooperation, including people-to-people exchanges and trade, which would be reflected in their joint statement. While the 3 nations would discuss regional affairs and complex global crises, Seoul made it clear that sensitive security issues would not be the focus of the talks.
The focus would be promotion of a mutual understanding and the pragmatic mutual interest as opposed to, strategic competition and opposition. And this is a very uncertain time for all 3 countries. The political leadership in Seoul and Tokyo are suffering from, early coming of the lame duck syndrome with very low popularity ratings. And China is very conscious of ongoing strategic competition with the United States, as well as the inauguration of new president in Taiwan. So the mutual interest would be cultivation of pragmatic interest and stability in the region.
While bilateral sticking points and geopolitical tensions will not be resolved easily, experts say they could be managed by focusing on functional issues.
In today's kind of complex world, the very complicated world, interdependence world, we need a sort of a very skillful balance skill to balance different kind of issue, imperative. So we have to deal with this geopolitical challenge, deal with like North Korea issue, Taiwan issue, U.S. pressures. But at the same time, we have to deal with this the issue on the ground, the integration of the economy, and like health issue, climate issue.
Yoon's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-ho said the 3 leaders will revive and normalise their trilateral cooperation system. Observers say this could potentially restart discussions to forge a 3-way free trade agreement.
So we may see some potential progress towards reopening talks for a trilateral free trade agreement, if only because China has some incentive to go ahead with this, since the problems of the Chinese economy, its slowing growth, its property debt bubble crisis, that gives the Chinese government some incentive to try and possibly get some economic benefits out of a free trade agreement. And also concerns about cost of living and ongoing economic stagnation in both Japan and South Korea also could give some impetus to a free trade agreement negotiations possibly going ahead. But
the three Northeast Asian countries make up around 23.4% of the world's gross domestic product. Yoon, Kishida and Lee will meet with around 80 business leaders in a welcoming banquet and hold a separate business summit after their trilateral meeting. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea is set to preside over the UN Security Council this June for the first time in a decade, with plans to have cybersecurity and North Korea on top of the agenda. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
For the first time in a decade, South Korea is set to hold the rotating presidency of the UN Security Council next month. South Korea, which is a non-permanent UNSC member, will chair the council for 1 month as the council's 15 member states rotate on a monthly basis. During a press meeting, Seoul's top envoy to the UN, Hwang Jun-guk, said undertaking the presidency is an important role in coordinating the UNSC agenda, adding that South Korea will be ready to convene a UNSC meeting in the event of a provocation by North Korea. Hwang emphasized that the role of the chairing country is important as it affects the direction of discussions on key global issues and international opinion. During its month-long presidency, South Korea will seek to hold high-level public discussions on the topic of cybersecurity. Seoul has been heavily focused on such issues due to evolving threats by Pyongyang in the security domain. For this, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol plans to preside over the session. South Korea's top envoy to the UN stressed that malicious cyber activities on key infrastructure and theft of civilian data and cryptocurrency are threats that all countries face. Hwang added that despite the importance of cybersecurity, the topic has not been dealt with as an official UNSC agenda. Seoul also plans to hold public discussions under the theme Child and Armed Conflicts at the request of the UN Secretariat. The ambassador expressed his hope that South Korea's presidency will contribute to the nation's push to expand its diplomatic horizons and emerge as a global pivotal state. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Signs that North Korea is preparing to launch its second reconnaissance satellite have been detected by the South Korean military. On Friday, the military said that activity was observed at one of North Korea's main launch sites in Dongchang-ri on the west coast. It added that South Korea and U.S. intelligence authorities are closely monitoring the situation and are preparing to track and intercept the satellite if it is launched. There's speculation that the regime may launch its spy satellite during the South Korea-Japan-China summit set to be held next Monday to maximize its political impact. 2 B-1B strategic bombers arrived at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam on Thursday as part of a routine bomber task force deployment. The U.S. Pacific Air Force's command said the bombers were moved from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota to strengthen readiness and the rules-based international order in the Pacific. It spoke about plans to carry out joint exercises with allies and partners in the region. Accordingly, the possibility has been raised of a joint drill with Korea and Japan, as took place last December over waters southeast of Jeju Island. South Korea has imposed a new round of sanctions against North Korea over the regime's military cooperation with Russia and for raising funds to support Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development. Japan also made a similar announcement on the same day. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
South Korea has issued new sanctions against North Korea as part of its latest efforts to counter the regime's growing nuclear and missile threats. The sanctions were slapped on 7 North Korean individuals and 2 Russian vessels related to military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow. Among them is Lee Myung-hyuk, a North Korean representing a state-controlled company based in Syria, who is suspected of being involved in the legal trade of weapons and arms equipment with Russia. Another, Han Hyuk-chul, the head of a company based in Vladivostok, was also put on the list for being involved in taking diesel into North Korea from Russia. 5 other individuals helped raise funds to support the North's nuclear missile programs by earning foreign currency as IT workers in Russia. The Russian vessels were placed under sanctions for allegedly transporting military supplies by carrying a large number of containers between Russia and North Korea. With the sanctions now in place, those wishing to engage in financial transactions with the individuals must obtain permission from the governor of the Bank of Korea or the Financial Services Commission. And the captain of the Russian ships must have domestic entry approval from the regulatory authority before entering South Korea. Announcing this on Friday, the Foreign Ministry said weapons trade between North Korea and Russia is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and stressed that South Korea and the international community have repeatedly called for an immediate end to their illegal military cooperation. Separately, Japan also announced sanctions on 11 organizations and 1 individual, including what it said were Russian groups linked to military cooperation to support the war in Ukraine. The country's chief cabinet secretary, Yoshimasa Hayashi, said in a press conference that this freezes the assets owned by the targeted organizations and individuals, and added that the transfer of North Korean weapons to Russia could further aggravate the situation in Ukraine. The sanctions come after Russia recently vetoed the extension of a mandate for the United Nations panel of experts that have been monitoring sanctions on North Korea, prompting South Korea, U.S., and other allies to seek alternatives. 배은지, Arirang News.
Over on Seonyu-do Island in the southwestern part of South Korea, Minister of Unification Kim Myung-ho visited an abduction site for the first time. On a beach there in the late 70s, 5 high school students were abducted by North Korean agents. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil has this report.
Families gathered at a beach on Seonyu-do Island on Friday where their sons and brothers were taken by North Korean operatives. In a ceremony, a monument was unveiled depicting a wish for the safe return of the 5 high school students who were abducted between 1977 and 1978. Minister Kim Myung-ho has been focused on this issue since the beginning of his term, making this a priority and his personal mission. This is the first time for a Minister of Unification to visit the abduction site.
The sadness felt by parents who can never forget their beautiful children who are taken away by North Korea is a universal heartbreaking sentiment. I strongly urge the North to repatriate all 5 of our high school students and to fully respond to the issue of abductees.
U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issues, Julie Turner, also participated in the ceremony.
The United States is committed to seeking the immediate resolution of abductee detainees and unrepatriated POWs. As a mother, a daughter, and a sister, it's heartbreaking for me to see the far-reaching impacts of the DPRK's human rights abuses.
She said that since many of the abductees are aging, action needs to be taken urgently.
I want to thank Minister Kim Myung-ho for organizing this ceremony for the first time at a site that North Korea hates the most. Our initial demand to the North is not immediate repatriation, but just to let us know whether our family members are alive or not.
Kim Young-nam was 16 when he was taken to the North in August 1977. He later married Megumi Yokota, who was abducted from Japan in North Korea. She's considered a symbol of Japanese abductees who were taken by the North. The other 4 teenagers were taken in pairs between August 1977 and August 1978. If all of them are alive now, they would be in their 60s. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, the Israeli military is expanding its offensive deeper into Rafah while continuing to shell northern and central Gaza. Amidst ever-increasing tension in the region, the U.S. CIA director is reportedly traveling back to Europe to revive truce talks between Israel and Hamas. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
Israel's military is reportedly moving deeper into the southern Gaza Strip, according to the New York Times and other media outlets on Thursday local time. The Israel Defense Forces claimed that it was operating in the Brazil and Shaboura areas of Rafah, as it seems to be expanding its offensive deeper into the city. Israeli tanks are continuing to operate in 3 eastern suburbs, and residents say they are advancing towards the city's densely populated western district of Ibna as well. Since Wednesday night, airstrikes in multiple regions of central and northern Gaza have also been ongoing, including Zabalia and Deir al-Balah. At least 12 people were killed during the bombing of an aid storage warehouse in central Deir al-Balah, from where the victims were taken to the only hospital that is functioning in Gaza.
A while ago, victims of a massacre arrived at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, part of the massacres in this genocide by the occupation army. 12 were killed during this massacre. Most of them were women from Deir al-Balah.
The IDF offensive is expanding despite international pressure and isolation over its war against Hamas, with an International Criminal Court prosecutor requesting arrest warrants for Israel's leader and defense minister, and Norway, Ireland, and Spain announcing recognition of a Palestinian state. To revive talks for a truce between Israel and Hamas, CIA Director Bill Burns is reportedly traveling back to Europe, where he is expected to meet the Qatari Prime Minister and the director of Israel's Mossad. This comes after Israel's War Cabinet instructed its negotiating team on Thursday to resume talks on a ceasefire and hostage swap deal. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now back here on the local front. South Korea's University Council confirmed today an increase in the medical school admissions quota for next year, finalizing a first such expansion in nearly 3 decades. Our Choi Min-jung has the latest.
The government's plan to raise the medical school admission quota has become a reality. The Korean Council for University Education met on Friday to deliberate over and confirm changes to the 2025 college admissions plan submitted by each university. The final results of the meeting will be announced on May 30th, and universities will announce updated admissions guidelines by the 31st. The government said this marks the first medical quota increase in almost 3 decades.
The 4 main pillars of medical reform aim to expand the number of medical school admissions for the first time in 27 years, to increase the significantly insufficient number of doctors, and revive the collapsing local medical system.
The government's stance is that there will no longer be room for negotiation for change in the future. The government also renewed their call for doctors to return to work.
Please return to work as soon as possible. That's the starting point for resolving the conflict. Due to the prolonged absence, field staff are becoming exhausted, and the anxiety is growing among patients and their families.
Despite the call, national universities have been rebelling against the government's plan by refusing to reflect the quota hike in their school regulation amendments. There have been strong protests from people within the medical community against expanding medical school admissions since the plan was announced on February 20th. More than 90% of resident doctors have left their workplaces, and medical school professors have also submitted resignations or leave of absence requests. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
There has been a special event here in the country this week. The Overseas Korean Agency has invited overseas adoptees to share their experiences, providing them with an opportunity to establish their identity as Koreans. Our Choi Soo-hyung follows their story.
It took 50 years for Julia, born with the name Park Hae-kyung, to return to her birthplace.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I landed in Korea, I felt like I was coming home. It's almost like I felt it in every cell of my body that I had finally returned to where I belong.
She reunited with her birth family in February this year.
Our books begin at chapter 2. The introduction, the table of contents, the first few chapters are ripped out. So learning the story was valuable, incredibly valuable, but I think more so just seeing their faces and seeing how much I look like them, and to feel a connection that's unlike I've ever felt.
Heidi, adopted by a U.S. family in 1974 when she was 6 months old, said that all her curiosity about Korea, which she had intentionally kept hidden, came flooding out all at once.
It just came at that pivotal moment for me. And as I was becoming a big fan of BTS, and I was starting to try to learn the language, everything kind of coincided. And it was that switch turned in, and I wanted to know all the stuff. It's this discovery of this other piece of who I am, and to be able to embrace that is very meaningful.
From Tuesday to Friday, the 2024 Overseas Korean Adoptees Gathering was held in Seoul by South Korea's Overseas Korean Agency. 96 people from 15 countries were invited to share their experiences as Korean adoptees. The agency stated that the adoptees should be treated as overseas Koreans, not just as adoptees.
Adoptee is unquestionably an overseas Korean and eligible for support from their homeland. The Overseas Koreans Agency aims to strengthen ties with adoptees worldwide in Korea. The agency will continue to promote gatherings like this conference to strengthen networks among overseas Koreans.
Julia Haegyong said that this gathering was very important in finding out her identity as Korean.
I would like to see us moving forward in this gathering to really establish a network globally with other adopted Korean organizations, while also building a relationship with the Overseas Koreans Agency and just feeling more connected to this country, our homeland, you know, the place of our origin.
During the conference, adoptees had the opportunity to experience Korean culture with their families, deepening their understanding of the country.
Adoptees visiting Korea experienced the cultural heritage of their birth country at the Korean Folk Village, a living museum featuring Korea's traditional lifestyles and performances.
The agency noted that adoptees' children are the ones who are actually embracing Korean culture more with their parents. Sophia, who loves K-pop and attended the conference with her mother, who was adopted by a Norwegian family, expressed feeling a genuine, familiar connection to Korean culture.
It was almost like there was a part of me that was empty, but I didn't really know until I kind of stepped off the plane. And I felt like this is another part of me that I have to kind of reconnect with. And
she was actually the one pushing me a bit. So it's been like a common journey for us to try and connect more with Korean culture and language.
The Overseas Koreans Agency will help these adoptees not only in finding their birth family, but also in embracing their identity as overseas Koreans and passing down their heritage to future generations. Cho Hyung, Arirang News.
In other news, K-pop girl group NewJeans has dropped their first new album in 10 months. Their double single, How Sweet, released on Friday at 1 p.m. Korean time, comes amid the internal conflict between their label Adore and its parent company, HYBE. Adore says it includes 4 songs on which the members worked very hard together on, including the title track, How Sweet, the pre-released track, Bubblegum, and instrumental versions of them. On the same day, BTS leader RM released his second solo album, Right Place, Wrong Person. His agency, Big Hit Music, says that this album, containing 11 tracks, including the title Lost, began with his question of what he might have been doing if he had chosen a different career path.
It's cool in Seoul today without there being any daytime heat for the first time in a long time. In areas on the East Coast, highs remained at around 20 degrees Celsius due to easterly winds, and it will stay cool until tomorrow. On the other hand, summer-like heat continued in the southern regions. However, the heat will gradually ease off across the country tomorrow. There will be lots of clouds all over the country. On Sunday, there is rain forecast all over the country. Rain will expand across the country at night, starting in Seoul and other places in the afternoon, and is expected to continue until Monday. Don't forget to bring an umbrella with you when you go out. Tomorrow's Seoul will start off at 18 degrees. Daytime temperatures will move up to 25 in Seoul and Jeju, Busan and Gyeongju 23 degrees. After the rain goes away on Monday, warm and clear weather will come around again. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Well, that is all for this newscast for this Friday night. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives